Long before the Shang dynasty forged bronze vessels, or the first stroke of Chinese writing met a bone, a once unseen metropolis ruled the Yangtze River wetlands. I am speaking of none other than Liangzhu, the earliest city ever uncovered in China, a 5,000-year-old marvel of dams, canals, and jade. Today we'll step onto its grounds to show you what the people here built, how they ruled, and what treasures were discovered here that rewrote what we knew about Chinese history. I realize my series on ancient China has already concluded, but this episode is going to be an appendix, a bonus. Recently I received an invitation to return to China, to visit the city of Hangzhou, a place I had never been. A local community organization there was awarded a grant to help promote tourism in the city, and they selected 10 people from 10 different countries to come to Hangzhou, all expenses paid, so that the org could document it all on video and use it to build interest in the city and encourage people to come. Well, I was chosen as the representative of the good old USA. So of course, Tina and I were happy to accept the invitation. They wined and dined us and showed us many beautiful spots. We took a boat ride on the West Lake right in town, and although it was drizzly, the beauty of the lake area still shone through. We went to the tea fields to see how tea was made, one of Hangzhou's specialties, and visited the tea museum, where we learned about hundreds of varieties of tea. We went to the Grand Canal, a historic waterway running from Beijing here to Hangzhou and to the coast. Although it reached its present form in the Yuan dynasty, its first parts were constructed all the way back in the 5th century BCE. It has a lot of history, and we visited the Grand Canal Museum to learn more about it. We were treated to performances of Chinese music and singing, and old-style Chinese opera. We savored the local cuisine, the traditional way of eating family style, and we got to taste a lot of interesting dishes. On one day, a local family took us to a historic Buddhist temple. And the Shilin Seal Society, dedicated to preserving and continuing the practice of seal carving and epigraphy, which began in ancient times. I didn't even know about this tradition before, so it was fascinating to learn about. They even wrote for me a quotation from the Liangzhu in calligraphy and gave it to me as a gift. We also ventured out of town a bit to visit Jiandao Lake. We were given a demonstration of the traditional method of fishing in the lake, which involved a large net and many men working in sync. Many history enthusiasts know about how the building of the Aswan High Dam in Egypt flooded the sites of many villages and covered over ancient ruins. Well, a similar phenomenon happened here. Zhendao Lake, also known as Thousand Island Lake, is a man-made freshwater lake created in 1959 after the completion of the Xinan River hydroelectric dam, and beneath its surface lie submerged ancient cities. The two most important ones are Shicheng and Hecheng, both of which date back to the Han Dynasty, and many other towns and villages, including ones inhabited right up into the 50s, were flooded over as well. The flooding displaced nearly 300,000 people. I would love to come back here someday and do some scuba diving to see some of the ancient ruins. But the main reason I wanted to go to Hangzhou is because nearby are the ancient ruins of Liangzhu, and they offered to take us there. Located in the Yangtze River basin in the eastern foothills of the Tianmu Mountains, on a plain crisscrossed by river networks, some 5,000 years ago, there once sat a major settlement that we now call Liangzhu. The Liangzhu culture flourished between 3300 and 2300 BCE, and the city was built somewhere around 3000. This is in the late Neolithic period of China, and yet archaeology has revealed an early regional state. There are 4 areas of the archaeological site, somewhat removed from each other. That's how big Liangzhu was. We went to the main city site. Its fortified core alone covers 3 square kilometers, and it was laced with canals, so much so that it looks like people got around most often by boat. More than 50 river courses, most of them hand-cut, once threaded the neighborhoods, and 3 broad channels flanked the Mojiaishan Palace on the north, east, and south, forming an eye-shaped harbor around the royal terrace. Add every ditch and canal together, and Liangzhu commanded over 30 kilometers, 18.6 miles, of artificial waterway. The city wall measured 1,900 meters north to south by 1,700 meters east to west. That's more than a mile on each side. Its corners rounded. 3 of its 4 sides had both interior and exterior moats, and 8 water gates pierced the 20-meter thick walls. Within the grid, timber walkways and household compounds clustered along canals, while palatial quarters and ritual altars claim the high ground. The park today contains farmland. Depending on the season, they either plant rice or wheat. Rice was the staple crop of ancient Liangzhu. Our guide Ruby first took us to the remains of the south wall. You can see here these poles indicating where one of the water gates in the wall were.
Off the ground. And the height of that, it used to be 5 to 7 meters, but now the remaining part is only about 2 meters high.
But up on the terrace, you can see the remains of the south wall itself, indicated here by the stones on the bottom. On the sides are a reconstruction of the archaeological layers to give you an idea of what the archaeologists found as they dug down. The south wall also contained the only land gate of the city, designed for foot and cart. That lone land gate sits dead center on the south wall, its architecture revealing just how seriously Liangzhu's engineers choreographed the people's movement. At the very center of the city rises the Mojiaishan platform, an engineered plateau made of layered sand and rammed earth, covering 300,000 square meters. That's nearly 1 million square feet.
It's a rainy one today, but we came out here anyway. The weather actually is mild, but we got a bit of a drizzle going on. And we are here. We climbed up to this top of this platform, and I'm going to show you what's up here. But this is the city center. This is the royal platform. This is where the elites, the leaders, the rulers of this city resided. And all around here, beneath them, on a much lower level. This platform was built, it goes up to 16 meters above the ground level of the rest of the city. So they deliberately built this to put themselves up above everyone else, showing you the social stratification that was here. And not everyone was probably allowed up here. Up here is where there were the foundations of royal buildings were found, which I will show you. And then off here to the side was the tombs, the royal tombs of the kings of this city. I'm using kings for lack of a more accurate term because we don't know exactly what kind of rulers they were, but they were royalty of some kind. But this area of the city center couldn't have been made without a massive undertaking of organization of people, and you can't do that without a state-level society. They estimate that within the city walls that surround this entire inner core of the city and these palace grounds, there resided at its peak around a population of 20,000 people, which means that if you're going by population anyway, that this is a city.
Post holes packed with reddish clay sketch the footprint of timber halls that once stood here.
On the height, be careful with your steps. And to your left, surrounding mountains, and your back.
In some spots, new posts were placed by the park so that you can see where they stood and how large they were. The posts we now know were floated downstream on rafts and levered upright with ropes and earthen ramps. A model of the city on top of the platform shows all the parts of the city center and helps you get your bearings. On the eastern slope of Mojiaoshan, archaeologists uncovered an astonishing 13,000 kilograms, 28,600 pounds, of carbonized rice. They believe a palace granary caught fire, and once the embers cooled, attendants shoveled the ruined stores down the hill. But interestingly, there is no evidence of rice cultivation inside the city walls. No rice paddies within the city or even its immediate surroundings. This is an indication that the farming was done well on the outskirts of town. Liangzhu practiced a deliberate urban-rural separation. The capital functioned as a political, ritual, and economic hub, while bulk grain flowed in from distant estates. Liangzhu's rulers commanded a hinterland large enough to feed a city in which no farmer ever swung a planting stick. Just east from Mojiaoshan is a low artificial mound called Fanshan. It concealed 11 royal tombs, arranged in 2 neat rows. From them, archaeologists recovered over 1,200 sets of artifacts: jade, stone, and ivory. The jade amounts to more than 90% of the articles. The ones placed here are replicas, but I will show you the real ones when we get to the museum. One burial, tomb M20, held 125 circular bi and 21 elongated tong. Many graves boast a single stylized jade yue axe, perhaps marking the rank or office of the deceased. Skeletal preservation is poor, but the sheer quantity and patterned arrangement of grave goods speak of a rigid hierarchy, whose symbols were standardized. Liangzhu had one of the most advanced hydraulic cultures in the ancient world. The canals were only the beginning. Liangzhu's rulers resculpted the entire watershed to tame the capricious tides of the Yangtze River. 2 complementary systems did the work. One is the Tangshan Ring Dam, a 5-kilometer-long earth embankment that arcs in a lazy crescent 2 kilometers north of the city walls. It corralled surging floodwaters, creating a navigable lake nearly 4 kilometers long and shielding the capital from sudden deluges. Farther upstream, engineers stitched together a chain of highland reservoirs. 5 colossal earthen dams, some 10 meters tall and up to 200 meters in length, stepped the valley like giant earthen terraces. Together, they trapped roughly 50 million cubic meters of water. That's roughly 20,000 Olympic swimming pools in volume. Radiocarbon tests peg their use firmly between 3200 and 2600 BCE, centuries before the Great Pyramid of Khufu. The labor investment boggles the mind. Nearby is the Liangzhu Museum, and this is where we can get a good look at many of the artifacts that were recovered from the site. Our guide, Emma, is an American archaeology student at Zhejiang University. She just so happens to be a fan of the channel, and she's the one that recommended that they invite me here, so I'm grateful to her for that. She told us about the archaeologist who had worked at the site, and she showed us many of the objects recovered from the tombs. These are stone sickles used in rice cultivation, and one of the interesting aspects about them is that a large number are left-handed. It's unclear why, but it does suggest that many of Liangzhu's farmers were left-handed. You can see many of the stone implements, adzes, knives, arrowheads. The wooden parts to these have not survived. These are yue, which are axes, handles restored in the image. An ivory ornament of some kind. Here's a reconstruction of one of their looms, and reconstructions of some of the buildings at the city center. Look, the wooden soles of sandals. And yes, other wooden objects have survived. I forgot to ask, but this boat may be a reconstruction based on remains that have been found. Examples of their pottery. A beautiful lacquered vessel inlaid with jade. But what fascinated me probably the most were the symbols that appear on many of their pottery vessels. Some may simply be decorative, but others look like actual symbols. Are we looking at writing? Proto-writing?
So it's very interesting because there are characters here that may or may not be writing, but you see some of these vessels contain interesting inscriptions, primitive characters. This particular pot is interesting because linguists have examined it and they have come up with several interpretations of what it might mean. They do believe that there is a message on here. And one hypothesis is that this is describing the capture of a tiger by a man. It's identifying the man, where he lived, and then you see on the front here a net and a tiger. They interpret that as a tiger, and that he is commemorating the catching of this tiger. But another interpretation is that this vessel is describing how to capture a tiger. So it has instructions for how to do it. So these are all just hypothetical reconstructions of the writing, but people are working on trying to figure out what it might mean.
Now these are the remains from Miaochen village on the outskirts of the city. The wooden section of a well has survived. And a wooden oar. At the Yaoshan site, just to the northeast of the city, was found a small settlement from the early period of Liangzhu, around 3300 BCE. There, a large sacrificial altar was found and a cemetery. In the early days, many of the rulers appear to have been women. Research has suggested that the altar and ceremonies held there were oriented towards the movement of the sun. But perhaps the most interesting part of the museum's exhibitions is the section on the jade finds from the site. What has been determined is that the burial objects give an indication as to the status of the deceased person. The number and types of objects are identifying features, and the more jade they had, the higher up they were. Here is a jade UX, a sign of royalty. Remember the jade bee I introduced you to in previous episodes? Those were from later times, and the circle was associated with heaven. But here we have them already in the late Neolithic period at Liangzhu. This tradition goes way back. And they also had the zong. This too is seen in later times, and the square shape was associated with the earth. Foremost among the finds is the King of Zong, a 6.5 kilogram square tube carved on all four faces with 16 double masks that merge a plumed human with a fanged beast. An image obsessively repeated across Liangzhu art, and likely emblematic of royal power. What happened to Liangzhu? Around 2300 BCE, its walls fell silent, apparently because of major flooding. Climate proxies hint at stronger monsoons. Some dams may have failed, inundating the plain. Long after its abandonment, people did come here again and settle, but it was never the same. Still, it is clear that many of Liangzhu's traditions survived. influencing the subsequent Xia and Shang polities up north. Its jades traveled far, turning up in Bronze Age tombs hundreds of kilometers away. And that, my friends, is the story of Liangzhu. If you like this video, check out the rest of my Ancient China series. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.